Okay, it's live. Hey, so today we have Daniel Powers of where you at? Wait, where were you from?
Hello, everybody. I'm in Melbourne, Australia. So, sort of the bottom right-hand corner, the southeast corner. You can't
Wow.
get much more southeast until you get to Tasmania, which is you got to cross, some water. But yeah, we're born and bred here. Uh, Spent my entire life here, apart from kind of traveling for work. Never lived anywhere else. So, born and bred Melbourne, Australia.
Melbourne. So you have any social networks you want to promote?
Yeah, sure. People can find me on most. I'm on the Facebooks, I'm on the Instagrams and the TikToks. So under IG and TikTok is just at Dan Power Studio. Same for both. And Facebook, you can just find me under Daniel Power. And then obviously I've got my teaching work as well, which is under Airbrush Academy. So on Insta and Facebook, that's at Airbrush Academy Official.
Oh, cool. Yeah, to be honest, you know what? I followed you long time ago. I don't know how I found you, but I was getting ready to start trying to learn my DVDs, and I always found your DVDs. And I was like, man, I saved a bunch of the pictures of your DVDs. So like, okay, I'm gonna try to model my covers like this here, and but that was crazy.
That's
So that's
cool.
I've known you for I've known you for a long time, but I've seen you and followed you for a long time on social networks and when I've seen you.
Yeah, that's cool. It's funny, the airbrush industry is a bit like that, and social media does that. You feel like you're kind of connecting with, well, you are connecting with people. But I remember I was at SEMA, and there were people that it's like you're meeting them in person for the first time, but you feel like you know each other, and it's like we haven't actually, like, there was someone I actually had to say we haven't actually met in person before, but we chatted and we'd exchanged comments and likes and all that sort of stuff. And yeah, it's funny, but I appreciate that, man. It's cool. I'm glad. I hope they helped you in some way, even if it was to help model your own
Yeah,
products.
yeah. So that was one of the questions I was going to ask you. Have you ever been to the United States? But you've been to SEMA before?
Yeah, I have. I've been a number of times. I was over there well, actually, we're not even 5 minutes in, and I've told a lie. I was thinking about my adult life. I've never lived anywhere else. I have actually somewhere else. I've lived in the United States for 2 years.
Oh wow.
But I guess I can be forgiven for forgetting. I was 3 years old at the time. So don't have a lot of memory of that. If my parents are listening to this, they'll be listening to that first answer going, that's not true. But basically, my parents packed up. I'm the youngest of 5 kids, and basically packed up all 5 of us, went over, and we lived in Baltimore, Maryland. And my father did his doctorate in psychology at Johns Hopkins for 2 years.
Oh wow.
So we did. I did. Not only have I been to the US, I lived in the US, but it was like from like 3 to 5 years old. So I don't. It's not something I have in sort of my consciousness. It's nothing I did in my adult life that I kind of I relocated to the States for a while. But
something you would really remember.
Sorry.
I said something that you would really remember.
Yeah, exactly.
At that.
Exactly. Yeah. So, but as far as traveling for work, I've been to SEMA a number of times. I went to Mike's Monster Bash in 2008, the first one, and that was really cool. And then basically went to SEMA after that. I was meant to be going to the US again in, I think it was 2020, but something happened there. I don't know.
Oh yeah, COVID
yeah, some sort of world shutdown. I don't know. You might have heard of it. But basically, I was meant to be traveling over. That was meant to be happening in October of that year, I believe. And not only COVID happened, but Mike passed away. So it was tragic for that main reason. And I felt as incredibly sad as I was about Mike's passing, and it was just even felt a little bit more tragic because I was going to be seeing him that year. So yeah, I was meant to be traveling for that. So I've been to the States. I've been to Canada twice to teach. I've traveled to Europe a number of times to do trucks and courses and stuff like that. There was a point there for about 3 or 4 years straight. I was going to Europe every year, sort of doing a teaching work tour in kind of Norway, Denmark, Germany, Holland, Netherlands. I catch up with people like Marissa and other people in Netherlands. I teach at Leon Art. I've taught in Germany at Airbrush View with Frank Heretic. Probably
wow.
pleasing to use my butchering of that pronunciation. And also taught with Roger and Katja from Airbrush Step by Step in Germany. I've run a course there, and the great guys at Airbrush. They're going to Kenneth and Michael are going to kill me. Customcolors.cc in Denmark. I've taught there probably 3 or 4 times.
So is the airbrushing different in all these different countries? Is it more automotive? Is it more like, is it t-shirt or is it more illustration?
Oh, that's a good question. Definitely there's a lot of custom painting cars, bikes, stuff like that in Europe. Definitely a lot of the people, it's hard to tell whether it's kind of confirmation bias, whether it looks like there's more of that because they're the ones that were kind of attending my classes, kind of the custom paint and the kind of fine artists, or whether it is more that way. There didn't seem to be, when I talk to people, there doesn't seem to be that kind of kiosk apparel airbrushing.
Yeah.
Like there is in the States, almost anywhere else in the world. Probably Canada, there's probably because there's that kind of bleed over. You're the same kind of landmass, But like even in Australia, we've got a couple of absolute rock stars that do it. There's Ergen, who with custom caps and tats, and then there's a group in Melbourne called Airbrush, Australian Airbrush Company that do tees and caps and stuff, and they're awesome too. But there might be a few more, but they're the kind of main ones. But in the US, like it just seems to be like kiosks and stuff.
Yeah.
People have.
Yeah.
That's something you find. Is that prevalently or prominently in the US, or more prevalent in the US? Do you feel?
I think it's a lot of it's more so. I feel like there's a lot of more, like you said, apparel, airbrush artists, t-shirts, but there's a lot of automotive. But it's still feel like it's more t-shirts based artists here in the United States that I know of, anyway.
Yeah.
So I always wondered because, when I was looking through your page today, I saw that you was in a magazine, or I never really saw you doing like t-shirts or stuff like that on your thing. It's always something like illustration or cars or stuff like that. I see you doing it on the boards now.
Yeah. Well, funny thing is, I did start in t-shirts. I went from shopping center to shopping center. I'd had a full setup that fit in my van, and I'd roll it out in kits. Like it was full, almost like a band with a roadie having the kits on wheels, and it would all kind of transform her out to and become this kind of segment, and I literally had kind of a rotation of shopping centers, and that's where I kind of logged the what they'd call the 10,000 hours of mastering a skill. Like I would literally sit there, and it wasn't just punching out. I did it like anything. I don't do things the easy way. I did it the hard way. I didn't have I had some set designs. I had like a book people could flick through, but people literally just walk up. I didn't have any kind of stencils that I'd put on, kind of spray around and it wasn't that if it was prevalent when I started, I would have used it. It wasn't that I was trying to buck the system, or if it was prevalent.
Go ahead, I can hear you.
All right. It wasn't like I was trying to kind of buck the system or be a rebel. Like I would have used whatever made it easier, but it just wasn't something that was around. The ability to have a cricket machine at home and cut your own stencils and create these designs.
So you're basically doing all freehand right there on the spot, whatever they asked.
Absolutely, and I found a photo the other day. It was someone came up and they're like, "Oh, we've got this mate we call him Mo, and he's just, can you do like a huge pig in a diaper holding a beer, and and you'd sketch it up as a little cartoon, and you'd show it to them. They're like, yeah, cool. And they're like, we'll have 3 triple X larges, and you draw that, and the next thing you draw. So you were like, it's really kind of sink or swim. You have to go out day after day, and whatever people ask for, you do it.
Yeah.
And there's nothing. It's evolved a little bit. There's a little bit of that, but it's a lot of the time it's I like that, but you can choose the colors and the font style, and I think that's a much smarter way of doing it. But as someone who's I always find the silver lining and what have you. And for me, I'm just grateful that as hard as it was, and as just kind of taxing as it was, like the burnout you do after, you do a shopping center at Christmas. I don't have to tell you those extended hours, and every kiosk has to be open the whole time, and you're the only one that can actually do things at the speed and the level that you need. And so you're there from 9 a.m. There were days I did from like 9 a.m. till midnight, and then you have to pack up and go home, and you get home and you've got to kind of unwind, and then you wake up and you're back doing another 15, 16 hours.
Yeah.
Well, it's Groundhog Day again, and so you kind of doing that. So I'm not saying, anything about that. I did it a better way. I'm just trying to find the positive in the fact that gave me this, ability to kind of just run with the situation, draw, develop my drawing skills, develop my airbrush skills, and necessity is the mother of invention. So I had to find a solution a lot of the time, So now, I was in Norway painting a truck. I'm jumping around here, I'm sorry. I was in Norway painting a truck, and it was meant to be in a booth at this, place that specialized in truck respraying, and, booth, great, lights, heating, everything. They had an emergency job, had to prioritize the booth. And they're like, oh no, we've arranged for you next door. There's a car park in winter in Norway. Oh, we've put up a tent. So there was like this vinyl circus tent over this truck in winter, no heating, no lighting, no proper lighting. I had one of those floodlights, and not a nice kind of balanced light. I'm talking like cheap hardware store light. They gave me a UV heater. So what I'd have to do is I'd have to mix my colors. There's a point to this, I promise. I'd have to mix my colors. I would have to get everything laid out, and then I'd have to put this big bank of UV lights not UV, infrared lights. So what it did was it made the entire surface bright red. So I'd have to paint with that, and I couldn't heat up the surface and then turn it off because it was such thin, it's molded sheet metal. It's really thin. It's going to freeze the minute you take the heating off it. So I had to paint everything I did, which was full color, but it all looked like it was under a red filter. Now, again, that's just experience. That's not any kind of, look at me, I'm amazing. What I'm saying is that grounding in T-shirts, years and years in shopping centers, having to work on the fly and pull things from all over the place and just go, well, we're here. This has to be done. Let's find a way. That is basically, I could do that because I did that, or I could do this because I did that.
Yeah. So
that make sense?
What you did earlier, it taught you and got you trained up to where when you was at a different, when you had to do a job that was difficult, you was able to do it.
Absolutely. So it gives you.
How did you learn about airbrushing? How did you find out about airbrushing?
It was so interesting because there's the technical point of when I actually learnt and it held one in my hand and sprayed it for the first time and used it for the first time. And then there was the fact that I'd fallen in love with airbrushing before I even knew what an airbrush was. And that was because I used to love the movie posters and the movie art and all these kind of things, album covers that I'd see. And I'd try and replicate them. I'd be drawing them with markers and colored pencils and stuff like that. And I say markers like, some sort of illustrator. I'm talking about textures you have as a child, But you try and replicate them. It's like, I just can't get the shading. And you even try that trick that you learned in, art in school where you shave the pencil, with a scalpel, or you Did you ever know that trick where you put the pencil on an angle in a sharpener, so you just shave in the lead, and then you'd use a tissue to smudge it to get these like really smooth blends?
Yeah.
I'd even try that to try and create these kind of smooth blends on these things. And then one day in my final year of high school in year 12, I was doing graphic design, and someone came to the school, and there was this one-day airbrush workshop. And I'm like, that sounds cool. I didn't even know what it was, but the teacher's like, it's $25, we're all doing it. Like, it wasn't like you can do it if you want. Do you have a bit of airbrushing? It was like, graphic design students, this day, this is happening, it's $25. He came in, he did it, and it was my brain almost exploded. It was like, this is what I've been looking for. This is it, oh my God, I can't believe it. And what I thought was being done with other tools in a way that I couldn't understand, which, I'm just ignorant. You don't know what you don't know, but I feel like a fool for not realizing it was done a completely different way. But, I basically, picked up this tool, and we started doing dots and spheres, and we did this, thing. And it was basically this one day basic. Well, I mean, what can you cover in one day with a room full of 35 rowdy and boisterous 17-year-old boys, but it was enough that it let me. Well, I definitely got the bug, and it was the point where I realized, where I found it was people are going to get sick of my movie references, but if you haven't noticed, I'm a bit of a film buff. But it was an Indiana Jones moment. It was like pulling the Ark of the Covenant out. It was this glowing thing. It was like, I found it. Luckily my face didn't melt, so it's all good. Happy ending.
Yeah. So what airbrushes were y'all using back then?
Sorry, I just saw a comment in the
Oh yeah,
there's
been a lot of them.
Sorry, what was your question?
No, go ahead. Well, you want to answer what Paul said? Dan doesn't know it, but he's the reason I painted so small for 4 years.
Yeah.
Do you know Paul Kniffer?
I do. I've actually got 2 of his gorgeous Paulie Smallies. But I didn't know I was the reason he painted small for 4 years, and I don't know why he did that because of me. If you let me know, Paul, that'd be great, because either you're welcome or I'm sorry. I'm not sure which way I need to go with that.
Which way you take?
Hopefully it's a good thing. Those smallies were amazing, so I'm not sure. Yeah, please elaborate, and let me know why I was the reason you painted so small for 4 years. That'd be great.
Yeah, because so I was asking you about the airbrushes y'all used. What was the airbrush you first started out with?
Okay, so the very first, the airbrush, after that one-day workshop, there was an airbrush in the graphics thing, which was a Ridge pen, and I used that a few times. But my first airbrush, and the one I really sort of learned on, was a Badger. I had a Badger 150 and a Badger 100. What it was in Australia, but it wasn't anywhere near what it was now.
Distracted, he's like squirrel.
I am. People talk about ADHD. It's like I have ADHD, OLK, which is attention deficit. Oh, look, kitty. No, I basically started on Badger, used them for years. I actually worked with Badger, the Badger distributor here in Australia. And then one day I got Yusuf and water. I can't even remember why or how. And really noticed a difference for me, just in the smoothness, the machining, the needles and everything. But basically, yeah, and never kind of look back. I've used Iwata for the last 25 years. No, 20 plus years. Yeah.
Yeah, it had to be 20 plus. I don't know for you, yeah. but I know I started with Badger, Vega. They had the Vega 2000s when I started with, and then it evolved into the Iwatas. Paul was saying,
yeah, Yeah, I saw that. It's shipping. But I love the fact. Okay, so basically, it's an interesting point he brings up because he's talking about the reason he painted so small, for anyone who can't see the comments or isn't following, is because it makes shipping really easy internationally, especially to Australia. Yeah, shipping from Europe out, especially Germany, will ship anywhere worldwide for $5 for a basic kind of, even a small, like a large letter. It's insane. But to get anything to and from the US becomes cost prohibitive to a degree. And I've been having people contact me through social media for wanting some of these kind of airbrush toon sketches just on paper. So they're really light, they roll up into just an A2 poster tube. And to send a single one of them, which is under 500 grams, to the US from Australia, is between about 50 and $60. You know, yeah. So I imagine a little tiny piece in an envelope would be much more pleasing to the wallet and to the client.
Yeah, I shipped a couple of my caricature DVDs overseas, and yeah, I was charging $5 to ship, but then when I got to the post office, they told me how much it was to ship, and I'm like, wow. So yeah, it kind of surprised me.
Yeah, it's a bit crazy. So, but to bring it back to your question, I started in high school on a ridge pen, but for the sake of technical accuracy, I'll include that. But it wasn't really like my first airbrush. My first airbrush was a Badger 150, which I got because it had the siphon fed with the jars, and I was basically doing t-shirts nonstop, and apparel, and I do artwork as well, but I basically was doing that and I wanted a quick changeover. But I didn't have, and I never had a whole airbrush set, like all the airbrushes and color on each one. I literally just had 20 odd jars and one airbrush and would flush in between. So again, did it the hard way. It basically did that, and then moved to water. But I started airbrushing in high school in 1991 and was full-time in my own business by April of 1992. So 31 years I've been airbrushing now. So if you can work that out, I'm old. That's what that works out to.
Yeah. Well, we all old now. So are you pretty much self-taught? Are you, besides that one class you had, or how did you pretty much took it home and did it on your own, learn on your own?
Look, this would then come down to the definitions of who's taught and what have you. It's funny because I've had 3 different people claim credit for that they taught Daniel Power, or I'm their student, which is funny because I would probably consider myself self-taught, because I did that one-day workshop, and then the person I did the workshop with, I then started, obviously on weekends. I was 17. I wasn't driving yet. In Australia, you need to be 18 to drive, not 16. It's 16 in the US, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you need to be 18 to drive. So I'd catch public transport. It was like a bus and 2 trains to get to the other side of town where their shop was. And it wasn't like an airbrushing shop that did airbrushing per se. They did a little bit, but it was more they taught and sold supplies and all that. And being like, when you get an absolute passion, you get into whatever you get into, you start get into Warhammer, you start going down the game shop and checking out all the figures and all the paints and everything, So I'd go in and just start talking to the guy and that, and then I'd bring in my work, and I was just hugely passionate about what I did, and he started getting me to work on the weekends and what have you, and then I was doing my final year of high school at the time. It kind of made that nosedive because airbrushing just became more consuming for me, and has been pretty much ever since. But I basically started working for him the day after I finished high school, and he started sending me out to shopping centers and stuff like that. And then basically that was November of 91. And then by March of 92, so I sort of did it over Christmas, and then, through January, we kind of did it, and that was really quiet. for us, because that's, you know, summer, people aren't going to the shopping centers, they're going out and away, and it's like our Christmas holidays. But by that point, it only took me 3 months to figure out that even though I was working for him, he wasn't, he was basically going, you need to go out to this shopping center. I'd have to book the shopping center, negotiate the space, all the t-shirts, work out the quantities, the sizes, I was designing all the like artwork. And I'm like, why am I doing this for someone else? Because being that you're on site, I was collecting all the money. So I saw all the money coming in and saw what I was getting paid, even knowing, and because I was coordinating all the stock and everything, I knew what the expenses were and everything. So I'm like, well, if I'm, you know, going to do all the work anyway, I may as well do it for myself. And if it grows into something, then great, and it's mine. And because I'm the one putting in the work. And if it didn't, then you know what? I'm not really any worse off. Because trust me, I was being paid like an apprentice, but I was managing that whole kind of, he wanted me to grow the whole kind of, as I already mentioned, I did a little bit of airbrushing, but not much. He wanted me to kind of grow that whole side of the business, but I wasn't being hired as a manager or in any kind of stake in the business.
He was still keeping you as apprentice pay and keep paying you less. Yeah,
exactly.
Crazy.
Yeah,
Well,
so it only took me 3 months to work that out. So that didn't take me too long. And then basically I airbrushed from 92. And then between that and 2001, I kind of built up from t-shirts to then display art, which, you know, the funniest way it was ever put to me was I explained what I did to someone, which was like, you know, the big 4 foot by 4 foot or 8 foot by 8 foot, like replications of movie posters and album covers that you see in record stores and, you know, movie lobbies and stuff. It was obviously before large format printers. Again, just sheer volume, different movie every 4 weeks, albums coming out all over the place. Album art and movie posters were all different styles and color palettes. So I was having to kind of learn all these different things. And basically someone said to me, like Xanadu. And I went, sure. I'd never seen Xanadu, which made me go and watch Xanadu, which I'm not happy about. But basically, it's you know, it's got Olivia Newton-John in it, and it's got a great catchy
I was going
song.
to say Olivia Newton-John's in there, right?
Yeah, but it's not a great film. It's really not a good film. But the guy in it works in a shop in like Miami Beach, Florida, or something like that. So I'm pulling that out of my butt. I don't know where it is, but it feels like something like that because they go roller skating on a promenade. So I'm probably thinking like, you know, Florida or Malibu or something like that. But he works in a shop where they produce these massive reproduction hand painted album covers that went out to all the shops and side of buildings and stuff. So, but basically I did that, and then that led into doing work for the cinemas, doing like more permanent art. Now, the reason I kind of ran through that timeline is because that was basically my first 10 years of airbrushing. And at that point, this was when the internet was just fledgling. There were a few chat boards and stuff like that, but it wasn't anything like it is today.
Yeah.
And basically, I wanted to know, by that point I was about 30, no, late 20s. And basically I started, 27 I would have been. So I really wanted to see, let's say, am I any good? Where does my work set up? Is there something I'm missing? Because I was mainly self-taught. I was like, am I doing it the right way? Is there an easier way? Is there a better way? So I went to the US. That was my first trip to the US, which funnily enough, I flew over September 21st, 2001. So if you can do the math, that was 10 days after a fairly significant event for air travel.
For when?
I flew over September 21st, 2001.
2001. Oh, okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
So that was only 10 days after September 11, which people were telling me not to fly. And I'm like, look, with everything going on, probably the safest time to fly. There was so much security. It was ridiculous. I remember having to go through like multiple checks getting on and off every plane. And basically I flew over and I went to Vegas and I did a airbrush getaway with Michael Casey. And that, I don't know, for people who don't know, Google him. He is one of the most prolific and best known airbrush illustrators of like the 80s and 90s. And then he moved and sort of retired, but started like kept doing fine art and original art. Absolutely amazing artist, absolutely amazing airbrush artist, and super nice guy. Like he really on that getaway, he kind of took me under his wing, like because I'd you know, it seems lesser now. The world feels smaller with, you know, the internet and social media and stuff.
Yeah.
But at the time, like flying all the way from Australia to the US just to do this 4-day thing was a pretty big deal and not the cheapest. And he kind of, I always appreciated that he recognized the effort I'd gone to, and he really kind of, he sat down with me and we grabbed a beer after the thing, and he kind of chatted with me and ran me through some stuff, and it was good. I did that, and then I went to Hollywood, and then later I went and did another course, which I fell sick at, and it was a 4-day course, and I was sick for two and a half of the days, which was excellent because not only did I miss the course that I traveled, halfway across the world for, I got to experience medical bills in the US. So,
oh yeah.
So what I went to, what would have been a visit to the doctor and antibiotics in Australia, which would have cost me nothing for the doctor's visit and probably about $20, maybe $15 in antibiotics, cost me $270 in US, which at the time the Australian dollar was worth 50 cents. So it actually cost me $540 to go to the doctors.
Yeah.
So that was an experience. But what I loved about that was I basically, and that's where I said it kind of depends what you mean by self-taught, because I'd already been airbrushing for a decade, doing work for people like Village Cinemas and, THQ Video Games and stuff like that before I'd even gone on that trip. And no doubt I picked up tips from that trip, especially from Michael. But some of the, 90% of it, I'm like, oh, I am on the right track. I am doing the right thing. It's kind of when the universal truths, and it's not like, I love self-learning. I'm always, even now I watch YouTube videos on stuff I'm not even going to follow through on just because I love learning about stuff,
Yeah.
People that do my courses end up getting extra little bits of information, whether they like it or not, because I put it in there for them, So basically, I went through and have been teaching myself. It's not like some stuff you discover on your own, but that's where it's like when something's a universal truth in art, or especially when you're talking about color mixing or applications like that, you're going to land on it. If you do enough volume, you're going to land on it. So someone else might claim they developed something or created something, and someone else can claim it, and they're both right because they both landed on it in their own way and in their time. But it doesn't change the fact that it is what it is. Does that make sense? That was in no way the answer to your first question.
What we got there? But yeah,
someone said they really enjoy talking to me because it's all they always get the scenic route. But
yeah, it's but yeah, it's
a lot of podcasts where the person comes on and goes, yes.
Huh? Do it?
Just comes on and says no, maybe, sometimes,
So basically, so they say they taught you, but you basically, after all the stuff you've done, you pretty much like, you're always going to pick up something from somebody else. But
absolutely, I'm still learning today. I'm still trying stuff today. I still, I might, sort of be practiced and developed and expert enough in some ways, but in sort of technical laying down of things. So what I might be experimenting with is combinations or textures or layouts or pushing things in other areas of art.
Yeah.
Some things work, some things don't.
Yeah. So how did you learn your I like how you do your portraits? Was that something that came natural to you, or is it something you had to work on?
That was something I did have to work on. It was funny because I did. It's great because the more you do something, the more you kind of break it down. Um, how important is the dagger stroke? We'll get to that in a minute. Um, and it was funny because I don't know why they told me this, but when I was trying to transition from t-shirts and apparel into more kind of higher level stuff, or higher end stuff, I should say, as far as dollar price and stuff, because that was one of the issues I was frustrated with apparel. You could spend a week on a t-shirt that is the most intricate and incredible design you've done,
Yeah.
and people would still not want to pay more than $100 for it because it's a t-shirt. You know what I mean? We weren't living in the age of, design a thing or wearable art in 1997. We were, it was like, it's an airbrush t-shirt. You want, $600 for that? No way. So I was trying to experiment with, okay, how can I get the art to a certain level and then the substrate to a different level to get what, I think the work's worth, or at least cover my time. Does that make sense? Does that?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I was still doing them on t-shirts, but I was doing these really higher end portraits. I was doing things like, again, movie art, because it was my passion. And I found if I love the subject and I love painting it, I'd practice more, and it was a portrait of Harrison Ford as Indiana Jones. And it's funny because he has a very distinct impression. I've actually, in recent times, I've seen memes where people go, Harrison Ford, the only person who can be happy with you and unhappy with you at the same time. And it showed the one side of his face was scowling and the other side looked like it was smiling. Now, that's important because if you try to airbrush that, if you don't get that balance right, it looks like he's about to cry. Right? So I did this Harrison Ford as Indiana Jones t-shirt, and someone came in and basically was looking at it. Or no, I was catching up with them, and I bought the t-shirt in, and I said, I just finished this one, and I was really proud of it. And they basically turned around and said, portraits just aren't your thing. You should probably just stick to cartoons.
Oh, wow.
So, like some people tell me I can't do something, and it's just basically then I'm just going to prove you wrong,
Yeah. Sometimes it's just motivation that gets you going.
Yeah. It's like, oh, really? Is that what you think? Is it? Is that right? So funnily enough, that caused me to go home and start painting a lot of portraits. But it was cool, Paul. It was. I thought it was particularly brutal. They thought they were giving me kind of tough love, and I'm like, screw you. No. But basically, I and to be honest, I wouldn't know where they are now, or even if I've still got it. It wasn't the most amazing portrait. I'm not saying it was fantastic, but it wasn't as bad as they were making out either, by any stretch, and it was particularly tough, considering there were other ones I'd done that I was really quite proud of. But the point is, I basically went and the portraits, there's a lot I kind of nutted out along the way, and that's why I think not to give a shameless self plug, but that's why I think my courses are so effective and so detailed, is because I had to work out what was working and what wasn't, why it worked and why it doesn't. So the ability to kind of go, that's why, it's like, why is it looking like that? And what have you done? What do you have to change to get it to how you want it? You're here and it looks a bit cartoony, it's all warped and it looks, too strong. How do you get to the point where it's softer and more realistic and, and looking the way you want it to look? It's not saying you need to copy a photo. I'm just saying it's, especially if you're going to paint famous people, there has to be a degree of representation and recognition of that person. You know what I mean? You can make it as creative as you want, but and that's what I'm trying to do at the minute. Kind of take things to another level, because it's in this day of we could go down a whole rabbit hole of AI art. But in this day where people can type in what they're calling prompt engineers, give me a break, but that to create AI art, you need, as an artist, you now going to need to have a voice and a reason for people to acknowledge your art over the typhoon of art that's being flooded on the internet.
Yeah. See, I have the problem of character. I'm a caricature artist, so it's hard for me to change from caricature artist to realization of it. If that's
Realism.
Yeah, realism. So it's I can't switch the balance because I always gotta have a black hard outline on it, and so I just gave up on portraits. I tried, but then I'm like, I'm too much of a caricature artist. I draw cartoons too much to try to switch over.
Is that what you love? Is that what drew you to it? Is that what you love? Do you even want to do realistic portraits?
I mean, I get asked at my shop all the time, but it's just I'll turn them down. I'll say no because like, nah, I'm a caricature artist. I mean, I can do a caricature of them, or I can try to do a cartoon of them, but I can't do the realism of it. So I try to avoid it if I can. But you got it down pat.
It's funny. Sorry, go on.
I said you have it down pat. You're one of the artists that have the portraits down pat.
Well, I like to think so. I'm glad people think so. I've seen a couple of comments saying that they're on point, so I appreciate that. I think the thing is, it's one of those things where I wasn't joking or making light of ADHD before. Well, actually, I was joking about it, but not in a disrespectful way. I've been diagnosed with adult ADHD twice. I have issues with, perfectionism. One of the hardest things they joke about, the two hardest things with artwork. Number one is getting started, and number two is knowing when to stop. Which,
Yeah.
And so basically, getting started for me is hugely challenging because I have huge issues with perfectionism, and it's hard because I'm not even talking about perfectionism in regards to the realism or having it look like a photograph. I'm talking about perfectionism as it's getting it looking as perfect as I want it to the idea I've got in my head. But I'm working on a canvas at the minute of Rosario Dawson as Ahsoka, and it's funny because the more real it looks, the more I want to kind of loosen it up and add texture and washes and stuff all over it.
Do you get in your way? Do you get in your own? Do you think you get yourself in your way, like overdoing?
Do I get in my own way? Absolutely. My trouble is getting out of my own way. My toxic trait is not getting out of my own way. The voice in my head is nonstop, and it's relentless sometimes. But I'm trying to get better at that, and I am getting better at that as I get older. And I'm trying to do that by kind of opening up more about it, letting people know that it's not abnormal to feel like that or think like that, or but you can get through and you can work on it. Part of it happened, over the last few years with the lockdowns and everything just going, I've got two boys and they were in school every day. So my thing was, I'm going to do the bare minimum of what I need to do to survive financially over this, and I'm going to be there for them. So I wasn't painting in my spare time or doing any extra. I was doing a few other things. So a lot of people thought I'd, completely dropped off the scene. Well, I did kind of drop off the scene, and they thought I'd kind of given up on airbrushing. I hadn't, but I was prioritizing some other things for a few years.
Yeah.
And I'm really glad I did. But my boys are getting older now. They're 14 and a half and 17. So basically, I can start to get back to, spending a bit more time. 17-year-old, he practices his guitar and he's got his schoolwork and he's got a girlfriend. And, so he, if I'm in the garage painting, I'm not actually taking away from time he wants to spend. Whereas even a couple of years back, during the lockdowns, they were kind of 15 and 12, kind of thing, which was, an age where they still needed, us around a lot.
Yeah,
so,
guys.
Yeah. But
I was talking about on your portraits, like, do you feel like it's finished, but you want to, you feel like it's something missing and you want to add something else to it, or once you know where you're done with it?
That's a great question. It's it's more often it's like I'm done. That's crap. I'll paint over and do another one, and then you come back about a week later and go, that's all right. Like, so I need kind of a week buffer quite often to kind of, there was something I'm working on, that artwork I mentioned before, and I'm putting a lot of texture and layers backwards and forwards. I often talk about artwork. I was actually made a note. I've got all these like little things I want to do, is like short, like TikToks or reels or what have you. Um, and one of them is, if you remember those old bathroom scales, not the digital ones, but the ones you'd kind of stand on or put something on and go so it's like when you start an artwork, it's kind of you race and you kind of race past, you're putting stuff everywhere, and then and that could be your guidelines and your rough sketch and everything, and then you kind of pull it back but maybe too far, and then you kind of, and it's just a matter of backwards and forwards and tightening it. And quite often, until that point where you can kind of step back, I talk about in my course, I talk about painting distance versus viewing distance. And that ability to step back. And sometimes you do need to, if you think something's, if you're at a point where you can't push forward because you think it's a train wreck, go make a cup of tea or finish for the night, put it aside, work on something else and finish on that for the night, and then come back and look at it the next day. And 99.9% of the time, you're going to find out it's nowhere near as bad as you thought it was. Yeah. In fact, it's probably quite good. You're still seeing it as the layers and the shapes and the bits and pieces, not as the sort of finished parts that fit together that people see when they look at it.
Yeah.
So,
what?
Sorry, there's a big long comments just come up on screen.
I was looking at that too.
Could you take a scuba snorkel?
That's that's something crazy. I don't know who said that. That's something. Yeah, that's why I took it off.
Yeah, I'm not going to finish reading that.
No. So,
thanks for that. Well, it's done. But I think the thing is, the one thing I'm grateful and really appreciate that people, say I make it look easy is because as much as the controls can hand, my blockages come from up here. So, but yeah, one of the things I think is always remember. I saw Paul made a comment that was where was artists are always one stroke away from done or disaster. It reminded me there's a great who was it? I've gone blank on his name. Surrealist artist Dali. I think it was Salvador Dali said the quest for the perfect painting. Salvador Dali said the quest for the perfect painting ends with the first stroke. In that, it's never going to be perfect, so just start. So your quest for the perfect painting is over before you start. So
yeah, that's yeah, that guy.
Yeah, we're being trolled by someone. Someone hasn't got anything better to do with their time.
Yeah.
So yay for them.
So let's switch to. Do you have any? Do you collaborate with anyone over there? Have you ever collaborated with Ergon or any other artists?
Haven't collaborated with Ergon. I have collaborated with other people. I've worked with Rod Tickle from where is he from? God, East Coast Airbrushing. One thing I haven't mentioned, a lot of people may not know at the minute, is just to explain why I might seem like I'm taking lots of deep breaths or feeling a bit vague or looking a bit vague. I did get COVID last November, and then I got it again in January. And the second time I got it, I actually ended up with long COVID, which I thought was just like the effects of COVID, but less like COVID light. What long COVID is for a lot of people is COVID. The COVID actually triggers a secondary condition, which for me is POTS, POTS, which is post-orthostatic tachycardia syndrome, which means I get brain fog, chronic fatigue, elevated heart rate. It's recoverable. I've had it since about January, where I could hardly get out of bed. I'm doing a lot better now, but it still kind of hits me. And if I talk for very long, I start to take these deep breaths or get a bit of brain fog. So I'm fine, but I'm that's what's going on. If anyone was ever curious or wondering about that. So, but because normally I know where people. My point being, I know where people are from, like Rod from East Coast Airbrushing. I worked with him. There was one great opportunity, which was he had a huge amount of work coming, had all this overflow, and he was like, I've got like a month's worth of work to do, and I've got like a week and a half to do it.
Oh, wow.
So we were able to shuffle some things around, and I flew up to Queensland and basically worked with him for like a week and a half, and we just punched out all this work. We were doing work on site at theme parks, like airbrushing rides and doing some car work and it was just all this kind of this mixed bag of stuff, which was awesome. I've worked with Wayne Harrison from Advanced Airbrush. We've done work together. Basically, we did a giant trailer hauler together for Peter Brock, who is a legendary Australian racer, car racer, racing car driver would probably be the technical term. You can tell I'm into sports, right? He's a car racing guy, you know. But we did this huge 18-wheeler. I've worked with Adrian from Airbrush, I think it's called Airbrush Australia. Adrian, I always get his surname wrong. It's one of those things where I said it wrong the first time, and then that's where my brain always goes to remember it, and I never get it right. But he's from South Africa originally, and he's an amazing illustrator and airbrush artist as well. And I've collaborated with Maretta from Maretta's Garage Art in Norway. We've done some trucks and jobs together as well. She had me over there to teach and run some courses, but also teed up some work for me. And we did some awesome stuff together. She's talking about certain, you know, airbrush work in certain countries and styles. I do notice not necessarily what they paint on varies. You know, there's custom painting and there's apparel and stuff, but the style they paint or the subject matter, like in Norway, they do a lot of stuff, you know, of Norse art and Norse inspired art and stuff like that, and that's really cool. I love the art that's inspired by their country and their heritage.
Oh yeah, yeah. So do you do a lot of 18-wheelers still?
I don't know who this user is, but thank you. I haven't for a while. I did do a lot of them here, but the last one I did, I think, was about 2016 in Sweden. I got flown to Sweden to do this kind of mermaid truck, which was very cool.
I remember I used to see a bunch of your artwork. You used to post a lot of that. You were doing a lot of those trucks.
I did a lot for probably 2012 to 2018. I did a lot. Or 2016, sorry, or 2010 to 2016. For sort of 5 or 6 years, I was doing a lot of trucks, but most of them weren't in Australia.
Oh no, you was going off to
no. Yeah, most of them were in Europe. I did collaborate with Jason Jewett from Red House Custom Paint. He was in Kansas. So on one of my trips to the US, I went to Kansas. I did some work with him in his shop. He's closed his shop, but still an amazing artist. He pinstriping, custom paint, airbrushing, all that sort of jazz. There's probably someone else, other people that I'm forgetting, and for that I apologize. But yeah, so I'm happy to work with other artists. I love to work with other artists, but I'm also, you know, very particular and have my own style, so I don't know how well that works sometimes. But I love it. Yeah.
Yeah. So let's get to you. When did you start your Airbrush Academy?
Okay, so the Airbrush Academy is new, but it's basically I started teaching in like 2000, 2001 maybe. So I've been airbrushing for about 10 years when I started teaching. And the teaching was just classes, obviously. And then that became the DVDs, which was, you know, the Power Series level 1 and 2, 2 different sets. Then there was a couple of project DVDs. There was one like How to Airbrush an Xbox 360. And then there was the other major project one, which was I'm really proud of, was the airbrushing with candies. But the airbrushing with candies I loved because it had a lot of really cool projects on it, and those that got it loved it. But I think a lot of people thought because they weren't airbrushing, cars and custom paint, that it wasn't great, or wasn't for them. But it really was for anyone. It was more about layering transparent glazes over artwork, and that many different ways you can do that, and the effect you can get, and how amazing that is, which is a way I love to paint. But since Createx has brought out their water-based candies, is it Candy 2.0 or whatever it's called? It's called something like
It's
that.
like illustration paint?
Well, it's a true kind of fully transparent candy as opposed to a translucent paint. It's like a water-based candy. Candy 2.0. Thank you. Someone's commented. So I want to kind of redo that. But the Airbrush Academy is basically the kind of rebirth and rebranding of my courses, but they're now digital, like online courses as opposed to DVDs. So the first course I'm redoing is my Power Series Level 1 DVD, which, I mean, that set sold over 5,000 copies. It was really what I can, like, we're not talking, Avatar numbers or Star Wars, but for me, I was really proud of that,
Is that something that you did by yourself, or is it like a production or something like that?
Yes. Both.
You put out
It was basically, I did it by myself, but it was a whole production. And I taught myself, I said I love learning. I taught myself about cameras. I taught myself video editing. I taught myself, very early motion graphics, everything. So, so even now, the courses I'm doing it all. I set the cameras. I light it all. I write the course. I present it. I edit it. I do the motion graphics. I do the video.
It takes a lot.
It's a lot of work,
especially
when you see, because this isn't just a one-for-one transfer of the level 1 set. This is actually it's been refilmed and re-presented, of course, but it's been updated. It's extended. Like, we're at the point, it's still in production. So that's the reason it's actually so cheap at the minute. I honestly believe it's a freaking steal for what it is, because it's going to be so in depth. But where it what would have been the 3-hour point on the DVDs is now about 5 hours in the course.
Oh wow!
That's how much it's been elaborated, expanded upon. So it's not just, as I said, it's not just I've transcribed the DVDs and I'm refilming that. I'm reviewing everything. I'm elaborating. I'm rewriting it if it can be explained better or with more depth or more understanding. I'm adding in more of, what not to do or why you might be getting a certain effect. I'm adding in. It's even still evolving. What's great is because there's a members group associated with it, I can get feedback and say, people are going, oh, but to go from here to here, what can you do in that meantime? And I'm like, oh, we could put in a whole kind of section about that. And what I love about it being an online course, is the DVDs had to be completely finished. They had to be done, finished, compressed into an ISO file, which is basically a digital version of a disc, then burnt to disc. Once that was pressed, like a book going to print, once it's done, it's done. Until you repress or republish, you can't change anything. Whereas because this is digital modules in an online portal, I can go in and go, oh, you guys need help here, or you need something to bridge that gap. I can write a module, film it, slot it in, and it's there. I know it sounds like I'm just plugging it, but this genuinely gets me excited, because that's part of the reason I've come back to this, is because I love teaching. I know what art's done for me. I know what airbrushing's done for me. I know how much I love it. And to see people, it kills me to see people posting online all the time, and they're like, this doesn't work. I'm not getting it. I've bought an airbrush. And they're so frustrated and disillusioned, and they just don't know where to go. And it's like, if they could just have a clear path, because there's so much information out there. And I don't know if you know about like the 4 stages of learning. There's like, and the first one is basically unconscious unknown, basically. So it's like you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
And then there's the second stage, which is conscious. What was I going to say? Unconscious ignorance. There's unconscious ignorance, then conscious ignorance, and that's often the hardest point to get to, which is when you realize how much you don't know. That's a really hard point to push past, because people go, when you first learn a skill, you get almost like a false sense of confidence, because you go from nothing to learning how to do certain things, and then something can kick in called the Dunning-Kruger effect, which is a false sense of confidence in your abilities, because you feel like you know a lot based on, you know, what you knew before.
Yeah.
Then it opens up and you go, oh crap, there's so much. So you learn a few chords in the guitar and you can play a couple of songs and you go, I'm a musician. And then you can talk to a musician, you talk about all the different scales and adjusting your guitar to tune. You know, I'm demonstrating my ignorance with guitar. I only know like the symbiotic knowledge I've learned through like talking to my son who's actually learning, you know, and doing music theory at school and everything, you know. But his you know, that ability to kind of go, I got to this stage, now I got to this stage, now I can get to this stage because I know what I don't know, but I know how to get it, you know, and that efficient path. So the Airbrush Academy is something I started, and it's funny because I did drop off the map a little bit. I thought I'm going to name something that's just strong in itself, and I'm actually toying with the idea now, changing it to the Power Airbrush Academy, because I realized that a lot of people are coming to it because of the level of quality of the course and stuff. And I've got people that have airbrushed for, someone left a message in the group the other day and they're like, I've been airbrushing for over 5 years. I've been trying to piece it together myself on YouTube. I've been trying to work it all out myself, and I'm just sick of being frustrated. And they're like, first 3 exercises, I've already worked out half the places I'm going wrong, you know? And that just means the world to me. It means they're going to be able to go out and paint. If it's a hobby, they're going to be able to paint for fun. They're going to be able to do what they love and actually just have an outlet. If they want to make gifts for friends and family, they can do that. T-shirts, artworks. I did a freaking 8-foot-high Baloo the Bear from Jungle Book for my nephew when he was like 4. So if you can imagine a 4-year-old who's like tiny, this 8-foot-high Baloo would have been like massive. His 21st birthday is coming up, and he's still got it because he loved it so much he can't get rid of it. Oh, that's what it meant to him. You know, so, and then if you want to take it to the next level and actually start doing it commercially, and you know, so the fact that, you know, when you learn something properly, it's then your choice what you want to do with it. Yeah. It's not you're limited by the skills. So I can't do this for a living, or I can't make gifts because, you know, I'm just not that good. I just can't do it. Whereas if it's I'm not saying because you learn properly, you have to do something with it. I think that's a whole nother conversation about just because you're good at something, does that mean you have to do it, you know, for money? But it's the ability to go, it's now my choice.
Yeah. But see, you know, a lot of people, I know, like for me, for example, I started as a hobby. I started out as, it was a hobby, but then it started becoming monetary for me. So that's how it switched. So it is once you learn, it is a tool that you can use. Like a lot of us did it for hobbies. Now it's our job, you know. Mm-hmm. So I thought about the same thing too. Also, is about the redoing all my DVDs and doing them over. But man, I just don't have the time to just, because now I think mine have to be like redone, because it's not so much of traditional now. Everybody's doing iPad caricatures now, so it's all digital work now. So, yeah.
You should do a course in creating digital characters on your iPad.
I know. I thought about redoing it, but it's the timing. It has to, like we talked about, it's the video, the editing, the coming up with
we'll talk about this offline. I'll help you out. I'll get you started, because you should be doing it. People need to know how to do what you do, because it's awesome.
Yeah. So, okay, is your class, is it a physical instruction, or it's online, or both? So do you have? Is it just where you could go on and purchase the course?
It's literally pre-recorded videos. So it's you once you enroll, the videos are there for you to watch. Now, at the time of this podcast, it's still in production, which is why it's a cheaper price. So you get the benefit of, you know, the units as they get published, and go live. You get instant access to them, and once it's finished, anyone that, you know, buys the course can watch it in its entirety at their own pace. They can watch one a day, they can watch one a week, they can do it in their own time. But they're not live. It's not like you have to be available at a certain time, especially in Australia. That'd be a nightmare. Like it's midday here, which means it's, or 12:10 here, which means it's 9:10 p.m. where you are, but that would probably a different time to New York, which is a different time to Europe, which is a different time to London. You know, London is probably the middle of the night there. So if I was trying to do live courses, that'd be a nightmare, you know. But what I do have is there is the option at the minute. Again, it sounds like a plug, but I'm trying to explain it.
No, it's
at
good.
The minute,
That's what it's here for.
there's a private members group that's included in the enrollment. Now, once the course is finished, that private group is going to be a monthly fee. Not much, about $5 a month or something like that, but it's going to be a monthly fee. And there's live Q&As in that. So if you're in the course, I do a regular live Q&A. Well, I will be doing once my health gets a bit better. But you know, people, I've done one already, and I'll be doing another one soon. But people can come on and go, oh, in this exercise, how do you do this? Or I'm having trouble with this, or whatever. But people can post their progress, and I give written feedback and stuff like that. So as much as I'm not there to answer questions on the spot, you're not on your own, okay, if you don't want to be. There's no, you know, we recommend people join the group. There's other people in there at all different levels that can help out. So if I can't answer a question immediately, a lot of people, you know, do get the answer to their question, because it might be something that needs to be added to the course, but it might be something in the course that they've missed. You know, the retention of any student is only a certain percentage of the content. I do recommend watching anything that you're learning more than once, whether it's my course or someone else's. But no, it's a pre-recorded course, so you don't have to make yourself available. But yeah, they can watch it anytime.
How important is it for? I've heard stories about the other courses, but how important is it to you for someone to actually physically learn something from your course? Because I was told before that, well, you could teach it, but it's up to them to learn it. So, but how important is it to you for them to retain what you're teaching? Do you know what I'm saying?
It's as in if they do the course, and are you talking about if they learn it and choose not to do something with it, or if they don't feel they can learn from my course?
They don't know that they don't comprehend. If you're selling them something, they're not comprehending it. So
that's hugely important to me. That's like the key of what I do. Yeah, that's a great question. No, it's vital. Like, I take huge amounts of pride in the clarity of my course and the effort I put into it. Like, we're even working at the minute with what we're doing. We're debating whether to have like a free trial of the first kind of modules. Not a limit trial, because then people could binge the whole thing and just not pay, which would be great, I know, for some people, but it's like, you know how much effort goes into creating a course. I've spent hundreds of hours filming and writing, filming, editing. As I said, there's full motion graphics over you know, every exercise where it shows movement. There's like diagrams and animated things to go with it for clarity. No, clarity is of the utmost importance to me. And if there's something that's not clear, I will do my utmost to either explain it in the group or refilm it or add a module. My goal is that you could watch this from go to woe and get to that like certain chapter in airbrushing. It's not, as I said, it's not a you know, I've got a number of DVDs and I've got courses that I've taught that never made it to DVD that are going to be coming to the online thing. So there will kind of, at the end, there'll be kind of like a platinum package where you can get all of them together. And that you did all of them and comprehended all of them, you'd be able to pretty much airbrush anything on anything. But you don't have to do that. It's just that's what the goal is, to give people that option of that range. But at the end of the day, the short answer is it's very important to me that people can comprehend. And I will
talk about 15 minutes of it. These are the short answer is, but
well, it's all the same question. It's but see how thorough I am in my explanations. Anyone wondering about courses? That's how thorough I explain things.
Yeah, you are.
Because people learn different ways. People learn by sound, people learn by vision, people learn by reading and watching, So there's notes, there's visual aids, there's demonstrations, there's me visually, like literally audibly explaining when I'm not airbrushing. So for all the different learning types, and that's the thing, I mean, I've got an understanding of the different ways people learn. I've looked into all that. I've learned about that. And so I make sure that we're crossing the threshold of the multiple ways people learn in kind of 3 or 4 different ways. Yeah. So I make sure that they're all catered to as best as I can. And if they're not, then we'll fill those gaps as we go.
Is it basically intro to medium, or is it like you already have to have basic knowledge of the airbrush?
This first course, you can start at dot. You can literally start out, no pun intended, but you can literally start with, I don't even know what the different types of airbrushes are and how to mix my paint and what have you. But I wouldn't, I'm actually playing with the name of at the minute. It's called Airbrush Bootcamp at the minute because a bootcamp is intensive training. That's the definition of the word bootcamp. And it is intensive. If you want to watch, once it's done, if you want to watch it all in like a week, you can, but you're then going to have to go and practice it. Just like the stuff you'd learn in boot camp. You can learn how to strip a gun. You're not going to become really quick and proficient at it until you've practiced it for a long time, But it's one of those things where there's like with the DVD, it was called Power Series Level 1, not Power Series Beginner Course or Intro to Airbrushing. It's so much more than that. It's so rounded. I mean, we cover layering, we cover freehand templates, we cover principles of painting, we cover all sorts of stuff, and we cover transparent paints and paint with both, and the pros and cons of both, and we cover additive techniques and subtractive techniques and all that. And by the time you get to the end of it, we cover intro to color theory. So by the end of it, you can paint not just a portrait, but any portrait, in a monotone, in transparent or opaques. So it's not, and it's not about painting or almost any artwork, but it's not about here's how to paint this artwork here specifically. It's about how to paint in principle. That's probably the best way to explain it as well. My programs are about fundamental foundations so that you can go, it's not about helping you paint a specific thing that's in my voice. It's about helping you find yours. The analogy I've used a lot, and I used this in the trailer to the very first DVD, like in 2007, which was, you don't get in a car and go, I hope I can drive it this time. You get in, and the question is, where am I going? Yeah. What's my destination? The car isn't the issue. The driving and control. You don't worry when you first learn to drive. You're worried about the clutch and the stick and the mirrors and the other, everything. And I still use that analogy in this course. Once you've learned it, you just get in and drive. And so the question is, where do you want to go? So with the course, it's not about worrying about, I don't want you picking up the airbrush and worrying about how to control it. I want you to pick it up and go, what do I want to do with it? What am I painting? So at the end of the day, the tool's not the issue. It's unconscious control. It's the muscle memory is there. The control is there because everything we've practiced and done through the course has helped create that muscle memory and that subconscious control. So when it doesn't teach you my voice, it actually helps you find yours.
Yeah. So I noticed on your Instagram now that you recently started doing cartoon caricatures. You were doing like, I guess, in one color or monotone or whatever that is. Is that something new? Is that something just to build up excitement for your classes, or is it just something that you're just doing just to?
That's a bit of an all of the above. The honest answer, and I'm glad I kind of explained my situation earlier. the honest answer is I wanted to be doing something to promote the classes. I wanted to just have some content for my socials, my social media. But I just didn't have the energy to paint. And I'm like, what's something that takes about 15 minutes where I could literally, you know, like, and I love cartoons, and that's one of the things I miss about doing apparel. I love doing cartoon characters. I used to do these really, you know, detailed and, you know, dimensional things. And I'm like, and that's just it. It's like, I don't even have the energy to do these multi-layered in color. I'll just do a nice quick monotone and what I'll call it my kind of time-lapse tune, or, you know, an airbrush tune sketch. And I've actually done a couple where the outlines are actually more sketchy, you know. I haven't released them yet. I'm toying with them. But the point is, I did them kind of going, these could go on my socials and hopefully get a bit of promo. I could use them to promote the courses because they ticked a number of boxes. They were really good. They are quick. So with the energy levels I've had, like, I'm sitting here fine, but, you know, quite often when I crash, the chronic fatigue, I can't even hold my arms up to airbrush, like and as I said, it's a recoverable condition. I am getting better, but to start with, it's like on a good day, I'm like, hey, I feel like I could do this, but I'll only get about 20 minutes. What can I do in 20 minutes? So it was, again, jumping back to what I said, necessity is the mother of invention. So I'm like, that's what I came up with. And if you do it in 20 minutes and put it on a time lapse, it can be done in a, you know, 20-second reel, you know. Yeah. And then, well, if I say, well, this is kind of the freehand control you can get, well, then it also ticks the box of promoting the course a little bit. It also ticks the boxes of reels, which is like, what's really satisfying to watch. It's quick, it's fun, it's bright. There's a connection there for people to their favorite tune. You know, not every tune. I did Wile E. Coyote, which I loved, and people are like, "Who's that?" You know, because a lot of people on socials are younger and don't know who Wile E. Coyote is, but they love Stitch, or they love Rick and Morty, or they love, you know, Pink in the Brain, or they love, you know, I've got characters from all sorts of stuff coming up. But you know, and I'm like, so they're really, but they also demonstrate, they're a really simple thing. They also demonstrate advanced competency with the tool to be able to do those outlines and shade them. And I'm even being a bit of a jerk. I don't know if I can swear on this. I'm really censoring my language. But I'm really being a bit of a dick, or a stubborn, you know, dick at the minute when I do them, because I'm not even using freehand shields with them, because I want to show that you can, you know, like how using, because what I'm making sure is I'm using the techniques in the boot camp. Even though we do get to shields, I want to show that, you know what, if you master this, you can do anything, you know? Yeah. Yeah, they tick that box as well by going, okay, it's cute, it's fun, it's time lapse in about 20 to 30 seconds. You know what? People who have tried airbrushing or do airbrush can also go, this guy knows what he's doing. You know, so that, and not to be arrogant, but it's like, who wants to learn from someone who doesn't know what they're doing? So yeah. I'm trying to, you know, Paul's comment, you freehand dick. Thank you. No, I use a lot of masking and a lot of freehand shield. Anybody who's done my program knows that the bird and the pharaoh are kind of the extension of my left and right hand anyway, you know. So I love freehand shields, and I use masking and when I need to. It's the right tool for the right job. I am definitely not one of these purists and against using, you know, tools that help. But at the end of the day, it ticked all those boxes. It was something I could do with where my health was at the time. It was satisfying to watch. It fit the time frame of reels, and it could promote the courses, but it also demonstrated a level of quality and competence in my work for someone wanting to, you know, if you've bought an airbrush and you're like, I'm so freaking frustrated, and I who can I learn from? And someone's out there going, learn from me, but their work looks crap. You know, anyone who's had to play with an airbrush will be able to recognize that whoever's doing these time-lapse tunes knows what they're doing, if that makes sense.
Yeah, because I noticed you're not doing quite a bit of them. I started seeing them a lot on my timeline lately. And that's a good intro to get people interested into your course, which is good.
Well, if they look at that and then go onto my page and see that, you know, yeah, there's other way, like I've put a couple of things behind me just so that you're not looking at a plain blind. But you know, they can see that there's other work, and with that same control, you can do X, Y, and Z, or X, Y, and Z. But basically, yeah. And the fact that I did one of Stitch from Glow and Stitch,
Yeah.
which got
Recently, right?
it's currently sitting at 250,000 views on my reels. So got a little bit of traction too, some of them, which is good.
That's good. I mean, that is a good way of doing it. Like somebody said earlier, it's, the real quick wheels are really could get some attention to people. So
as I said, it ticked that box. So that's where the and it kind of was a throwback to my early days as well. So, but as you said, you'd never seen me do anything like that before. Whereas that's really where I was born and bred, the cartoons.
Yeah, yeah.
I think I've actually got. Isn't this gripping podcasting? This is me sifting through a box of old photos. No, I actually found this box of old. And when I say old photos, I mean literal photographs. But like, yeah, I found this old work. Here's some teas. I don't know how well this is going to translate. But like anything, they say, oh, here we go. Talking about, painting anything. I talked about that. This is what reminded me of that. This is that. I'm not sure how well people are going to be able to see it. There's that fat thing called Mo holding beer.
Oh, yeah.
Fat Porker Mo on the back of these t-shirts holding a beer.
Really Stimpy, yeah.
Oh,
so you did actually do t-shirts.
Yeah, these are all old t-shirts. These are I wish I had a lot more of these photos, but I even did a step-by-step for Australian Airbrush Art magazine, and it was on my step-by-step was t-shirts. So it was, starting with the outline and then the color layering. There's your yellows right through to the finished chook.
Nice. You are you published a lot over there in Australia?
That was look at that, hour 99.
Wow.
The t-shirt's 24 years old. And then I told you I started getting into the more. So that was on a t-shirt too.
Oh, that's nice.
But so I saw that there, and I'm like, we're just talking about these, but just showing you that yeah, these cartoons were actually where I started. They were just color most of the time.
Are there a lot of airbrush magazines over there?
There's none now. And there was just the one that ran for about 4 years, I think. So no, there was Airbrush Action. There was Australian Airbrush Art magazine for about 4 years. Where's the overspray on the t-shirt? You mean?
Yeah.
I keep it clean. And there's a trick to that. I'm actually putting together a YouTube video on 5 tricks to was it 5 tricks in 5 minutes or something to next level your airbrushing or something to that of all your cartoons. And one of those things is how I keep it so clean with the level of shading. So
okay, so we're gonna do last
one.
What's your where do you run your PSI at? What PSI you paid at?
That's a great question, because it's one of those. It's almost one of those pain point questions. You know what I mean? Like, a lot of people, they want to know this hard and fast answer, and the frustrating thing is, I think for a lot of people is, I'm a bit of a contradiction. I'm a bit of a airbrushing is such a technical tool, and a lot of the time my work finishes quite clean, but I work really you know, kind of intuitively to a degree, as far as my, you know, if it really is, because I've got a Mac valve on my thing, not with a regulator, but just the thing, and I'll constantly be turning it up and down. So I've probably got it set on about 50 or 60 on the compressor, but I turn it right down with the Mac valve. Because if I'm using really thin paint and doing detailing, you know, I'll turn it right down. If I'm blasting on a background or working with thicker paint because I want it more intense and more coverage and what have you, I'll have it higher. As a whole, but it's so funny. I only say that because in the course that seems to be a prickly question about, but what's the PSI? What's the perfect PSI? Yeah. It's like, it's how long is a piece of string? You know,
I'm 80. I'm 80 on everything.
Oh, really?
Everything. T-shirts.
Wow.
Hard surface, average baseball helmets. I'm 80 PSIs.
And you don't find you get spidering or bleeding or anything?
At first, I used to get spidering, but one day it just cleaned up on its own. I don't know what I did. I don't reduce my paint. Do you reduce your paints or anything?
It depends on the color and what I'm doing with it. Yeah, but I do. And again, I have a hot mix going on in my airbrush. So, you know, I might be using a thing, and I kind of a color, and I use it over a portrait. But then I want to go in and do a few things. So I'll just open up the cup and add a bit of reducer, and then shake it up, or, you know, add a slightly different color that's already thinner, and it kind of goes in. So it's like I'm continuing. It was already thinner, so it's a bit thinner now. So I need to just drop it a sec. But I can adapt. I mean, sometimes I like doing fine detail with really high pressure because it means you don't get any tip dry, and you can kind of go in. It just means I've got to like do micro movements on the trigger, as opposed to some people like the lower pressure with thinner paint because they want to go in tighter and you know, just be able to pull back further with less pressure. Whereas I like being able to go in sometimes with the high pressure, and you're literally hardly even moving. It's in Australia what we'd call a bee's dick. You're moving just a bee's dick back. You know?
Bee's dick.
Well, that's a tiny amount.
Yeah, it is.
So that's why, like, a friend of mine is he does engineering and stuff, or, you know, you're moving furniture, and it's like, oh, I can't get it through the door. And it's like, if it was just a bee's dick thinner, we'd be able to get it through the door.
So,
you're welcome.
What's your brand of paint you use?
Again, excellent question. I use whatever I need for the job. I use automotive paints. I use water-based. I've used a mix over the years. I've used Createx. I've used Trident. I've used House of Color. I've used Protec, which was like an Australian-based automotive base coat here. Yeah, I just kind of use whatever I need. Again, it's like in my course, I do get into paint brands, or I do get into mixing paint. And there's a module I'm working on at the minute to kind of bridge a gap. But as far as I really say, because there's certain paints that aren't available in certain countries or to certain regions or whatever. So if I say use this paint and reduce it, you know, I've seen formulas where people say take this paint in this bottle and put in 17 drops of the color and then 12 drops of reducer and work at 35 psi. And I'm like, are you freaking kidding me? Like one, I'm not that technical engineering. To me, that becomes a technical exercise, not painting anymore. That's, again, my personal opinion. But secondly, that same paint in a 40-degree centigrade day, summer in Australia, is going to be a very different consistency to a Norwegian winter day, you know, and where they're painting. And depending on what you're wanting to paint will depend on how much reducer you add and that sort of stuff. So, you know, I basically, in the course, I will talk about the different paint brands in the private student group because that's where I can answer questions. But in the course, I basically say there are so many different paint brands, and I literally have like 28 logos or 24 logos come up on screen, and it just says in text, and that's not even all of them. Because it all depends on what you're going to be using and what have you. So, and I do believe it's kind of like the car. Yeah, a better car will drive a bit better. If you know how to drive a car, you can get in any car with any fuel and go somewhere and do something.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
That makes sense, yeah. Okay, so last couple of questions. Do you have any? What kind of hobbies do you do outside of airbrushing? Do you do anything other than airbrushing, or is that just what you do?
Um, it's funny. It is my hobby as well, but I do other art. I do acrylic painting. I bought some oil paints. I want to learn a bit about that, but I just haven't had the energy to do that. I do watercolors and marker sketches and stuff like that. I did an ink marker Spider-Man that's recently on my Instagram. So I've always loved art. I love airbrushing. Don't get me wrong. That is kind of my number one passion. But I also just love art, and I do love different styles, and I do love to look at different styles because that kind of gives me, inspiration for my work. But I love sculpting. I actually worked as a sculptor on Where the Wild Things Are.
Oh wow!
If you watch Where the Wild Things Are, and in the credits it says lead sculptors, and it says Daniel Power in the credits. You can verify that. Video editing is the number one passion. With the reels, I actually have to get better at making them more raw. I actually love doing these really elaborate reels that have like time cuts and effects and bits and pieces, and they'll get like 16 views.
Yeah.
And I do one that's like, I literally set up I've got a print artwork. It's a 16-inch by 16-inch canvas. So it's this one here.
Yeah, I saw that.
And I love this. And I literally saw these people on Reels doing these things where they use a trending sound and they literally just turn it around on camera. And I'm like, screw it. I'm going to try that. And I did it in this room, which is like the most yellow, uncolor adjusted light you've ever seen. Like, it's horrible. I did it in like 6 seconds and it got like 50,000 views.
That's
Man,
great.
it pissed me off. I'm like, really? But as far as video editing, like I did a thing, I don't know where to post it, but I have these ideas, but I love creating something out of nothing. Like I love crafting a story. Like, so I've done things that I've never posted anywhere. They were just like kind of short stories and stuff. I did one where recently I just did a mashup of from Avatar 2. You've seen Avatar 2?
Yeah.
Where the Na'vi guy, Jake's son, wakes up once the whale thing's rescued him. But I've mashed it up with the sound from Nemo, where the turtle is waking up Nemo's dad. Like, dude, hey, dude. Oh, hey, dude, there you are. And it's like, I haven't posted it anywhere, but I lined it up kind of like, and then the bit where he's holding onto the fin in Avatar and it's rushing through the water and he's like, faster. That's when they're going through the EAC covenant and he's like, righteous. And it's real. I found it amazing anyway. So it's one of those things where it's like, when I'm doing the courses, if I didn't love the video editing and the motion graphics and everything, I would never do it because it's so time consuming and labor intensive and hard work.
It is.
That I would never do that on my own if I didn't love it, which I do. So I do love that. I love stuff. So a lot of stuff is creative. I do love movies. So I watch movies and shows with my family and my mates. But I haven't, again, been able to get out much because I crash very early too. Like by the time I've had dinner, I'm wiped and I can't. So I've got a mate who's like, we're going to the movie, I'm picking you up, we're going to move on the weekend and we'll go like an afternoon session, he's one of my best mates, like a brother, and he's take care of me. But yeah, so I do have hobbies, but I love music, but I listen to it. I don't play it because I'm not very good. But yeah, other creative things, marker, watercolor, sculpting, editing, that sort of stuff, and just spending time with friends and family, like boring stuff.
Yeah, that's cool. Well, I appreciate your time, sir. I know what is about 1 o'clock there now, 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock.
12:38 p.m. on Thursday.
So you still got a whole day left.
Oh yeah, I'll be having a rest after this. I will crash. But it's all good. Were there any questions we missed in?
No, everybody was talking about the PSIs.
Photoshop. Ed asked a question. Photoshop.
Yeah, do you do Photoshop?
Do I use it or is it a hobby? I do love Photoshop. I taught myself Photoshop. I do love using it. I do. Oh, photography. I should mention that. I actually have worked as a professional photographer and as a designer in a photo studio. When I sort of took a step back from the airbrush industry and sort of, as I said, prioritize family, I did consult with a photo studio, and I basically did photography professionally and sold about $9 million worth of photographic art.
Oh, wow.
So that art sales is a whole nother thing we could talk about. That's a podcast in itself.
Yeah.
Building value, overcoming objections, all that sort of stuff. There's a skill to it. It can be learned. And understanding the value and understanding that an objection is just an opportunity to build value. That's the number one takeaway. So if you need to go, that's fine. But the ability, people, can I say something?
Yeah, go ahead.
The number of times I see people posting, and don't get me wrong, I'm not bitching about this. I get it. I laugh at them too. But you see those photos people post with the memes that are things like, the job costs this much if you want to, check in, this much if you want to watch, and this much if you want to tell me how to do it. It's extra every time, kind of like, don't bother me, or this would be such a good thing for all these freaking customers, or or people get frustrated with people going, oh, they expect it to be this much, and they don't know what's involved. It's like, of course they do. They don't do this for a living.
Yeah.
But instead of getting angry at them, go, hey, I'd love to be able to do it for that, but here's why I can't. Do you know much about this? And they'd be like, oh, no idea. So you can go, well, first I've got to do this. And you know what? If you're willing, and yeah, you may have to do this with every customer. You have to repeat yourself. You know what? I've gotten someone who rang me up to do a set of motorcycle tins. They said their budget was $1,200. By talking to them and explaining what I did and how much effort I was going to put into their job and how much work I do, and that they'd seen another job of mine. So I kind of want you to do that. I'm like, I won't do that because, and they're like, why not? And I said, the same way that I finished your work and your original design, I won't then copy that on someone else after you. I will explain everything. I got someone with a $1,200 budget for basically a full bike tank and oil cap. It wasn't a whole set of tins, up to about $3,000, and that wasn't including clear. They were getting it cleared. But because I took the time, I explained it, I built value in everything I did, and I treated them with respect. If I turn around and go, get stuffed, I'm not paying it for that. Are you kidding? Who do you think? It's like, you think they're going to pay you now? Let alone pay you what the job's actually worth? And I don't say that I say that with love, and I know that sounds really cliche, but I do. I say, like, if you are willing to go, these people are ignorant, but the same way that, you know what, if you went to do 1,000 other skills that you're not adept in, you don't know what goes into it.
Yeah, true.
It's not their job. They're coming to you because you're the expert. It's your job to know all the parts. It's not their job to know all the parts.
That's a good point. That's a really good point.
There are people that I know went from prices on the baseball caps to, from $30 to $45, because I started explaining the process to people.
Yeah, they don't know what all goes.
We do this, we use this. Understanding the point, building value in everything, and understanding. As I said, this could be a whole podcast episode, but understanding value. But the term value then has to be defined. Some people define value in art by, how much they like it. Some people define value by the price of it. Some people define value by the materials used. Oh, this is an archival canvas. The canvas itself is hundreds of dollars. This is graded for 30 years. I use all these, pigments that are ground from, natural elements, and the reds are made from this clay and that. You know what? Pretty much every paint is made that way. But if you explain that to people, and, I talked about people learning one of 4 different ways. People see value in different ways. So if you talk about the time you've put in, I saw a comment about, it's like, yeah, I might be able to do this in 3 hours, but it's not 3 hours. It's 30 years in 3 hours.
Yeah.
The same way that, a race car driver can drive around the track and do a race, they get paid, or a basketballer can throw 9 out of 10 free throws or whatever. It's because of the hour they put in off the court, or on the court, but off the game.
Yeah.
And just taking the pay, and it's all those cliches people hear, become a servant to people. Not necessarily that you give your stuff away, but be it service. If you're in the service industry, try serving those people.
Well, hey, sometimes people will test you, and it's be like, you know.
Yeah, I'm not saying there's exceptions to every rule. I'm not saying you have to put up with what these days would be called Karen, or put up with abuse, or be a doormat. There's levels. I fully acknowledge that. And I have to remind myself too. There are times where I have to pull myself up and go, Dan, stop being a dick, because ego comes into play. Yeah. But when you realize it's that ignorance, as I said, we're all human, and there's exceptions to every rule. If you treat this as a set of rules or guides that there are exceptions to, and someone's coming in and going, and you're building value, and they're going, that's bullshit, I'm not paying, that's not worth $30. It's like, that's fine. You know what? You don't have to buy it.
Yeah, true story.
There's another guy down here or over there, go and see him. Yeah. I literally had a guy say to me, I want it for $600. It was a spare wheel cover, a hard cover, and he wanted it airbrushed, custom painted on, including clear, for $600. And he was trying to appeal to my ego. He said, I've driven 45 minutes to see you. I passed another guy I know does airbrushing, and he'll do it for 600. I said, well, what are you here for?
Yeah, why you pass?
And I literally called him on it, and I said, what are you here for? And he went, because your quality's better. He can't do what you do. And I probably shouldn't have said that. Probably should have, been a bit more humble. I turned around, I went, and I kind of pretended to open a book. I said, now we're on the same page. I'm like, so you want my quality for his price. I said, have you ever stopped to think that there's a reason his job would be 600? I said, that's like going in to a Ferrari dealer or a Porsche dealer and saying, I want this for this price, for the same price as that Holden.
Yeah.
No. It's like, why would I want that? Because I can buy the Holden for that. Well, why would not go and buy the Holden? Because I want what the Ferrari does. And I explained it that way. And you know what? I pulled myself up and I kind of explained it and broke it down. And the ability to show him that value and that difference, he got it done. And he paid $1,200. So it's a matter of you can also let your ego take over, but then you're sitting around twiddling your thumbs wondering why you got no work in.
Yeah.
But there are people that are disrespectful, there are people that are rude, and there are people that you need to say, and that's a whole other thing which I'm not going to go into, but you've got the right to say no. You don't have to do everyone's work. If someone's not valuing it, they're not going to value it, and you'll find that the people that value your work the least are going to expect the most and give you the most headaches.
True story. Well, that is another podcast that we can do another time. I would like to get you back on, and then whenever we have one of these like a open podcast and everybody jumps on.
That'd be cool. Some think tanks, some group chats.
Yeah,
that'd be cool.
So I'll let you know.
Well, I hope people have enjoyed it and got something out of it, or at least had a laugh.
Yeah, we had Gerald Mendez even jumped on to say something
earlier. Oh, Gerald was in. I didn't see that.
Yeah, that was a little earlier.
But Gerald's amazing. Gerald, I've never. He was at the first Monster Bash I went to in 2008. We got on like a house on fire. He then met him at Disneyland because he was working for Disney at the time, and he took me in, and which was really generous and thoughtful. And he couldn't stay with me for most of the day, but he kind of came and got me in and looked after me, got me set. And nicest guy, always so complimentary of my work, and always generous with his time, and just love him to death. An amazing art, respect him hugely.
Yeah.
So, well, thank you for having me.
Well,
thank you for having me.
Oh no, thanks for getting on with me. Appreciate it.
Pleasure.
All right, thanks a lot, Daniel. Have a good one.
Bye.
Bye.